The first thing you have to do before installing Eve's Revenge is prep the area that you're installing it. And that's done easily with a weed eater. So just start, go all the way down the outside of the fence line if you can help it. We always prefer to do the install on the outside of the fence if you have that choice. But I understand some of you live in neighborhoods where you share a fence with your neighbor, and in those situations it's fine to install it on the inside of your fence line. The reason we prefer it to be on the outside, if you can help it, is because it will stop the snakes on the outside without them ever having a chance to go underneath or inside of your fence line. That's the only difference with this system. If you install it on the inside of your fence, then they will have to come under your fence before they can get into the net. Versus the outside, it stops them on the outside of the fence. So step number 2, after your fence line is cleaned of all the undergrowth and debris, you take your netting and you unroll it just on the edge, and you see which side is the smaller grid netting. This side here is the smallest grid. So this side is going to be the one closest to the area you're protecting. For example, if we're hanging this on the outside of your fence, the small grid would lay against the fence, where the larger grid would be the first one that the snakes hit when they come through. And this is a good rule of thumb to keep in mind. This acts like a snake filtration system. The medium to large size snakes will come up to your barrier and they're going to hit the large grid first, and it will hold them, whereas the baby snakes will continue through this large grid and they will hit the small grid that's backing it up. I get asked a lot, is this system hard to install? And absolutely not. It's a one-person job, and I'm going to show you how easy it is. Take your 2 layers. Obviously, you want to identify once again, where's your large grid, where's your close grid. Our large grid is on this outside right here. So we're going to take this top corner and attach it to the fence right here. And then we take a landscape staple, and then we want to make sure that this is staked into the ground. So now what we have is we have it anchored here on the corner with our zip tie, and now we have an anchor here in the ground with our landscape staple. Now these will be sufficient to unroll the netting and go the distance that you're trying to cover. Now I'm going to go ahead and unroll this so you can see how easy this system will unroll and attach with one person doing it. Once I get this side done, then I will continue down the top and zip tie the top in place first, and then we'll come back and then stake down the 2 layers to the ground below it. Any snakes that are coming and hitting it, you don't want those barriers touching each other, because if they're stacked against each other, in theory, it won't let a large snake push through because of the smaller grid that's hitting that snake in the nose. So that's why you got to always have a little bit of separation on those nets. Also, the tighter you hang this net, if you stretch it really, really tight, this system acts more like a blockade. Now, if you leave it really loose, like this, and you got all this bagginess here, now it acts like a snare. This is the most devastating way to install this fence if you want it to entangle and snare the snakes that try to get onto your property. Now, some of the areas that you're staking the material to the ground, you'll notice that there's no perfect ground. You're going to have dips, you're going to have low spots in some areas, and it may require more landscape staples than the regular one per every 2 feet like we recommend. So that's just something to keep in mind. So you want to have some bagginess like this. If you have the bagginess, it really works great. After you finish securing Ease Revenge to the ground and to the fence, the last thing you would do is go back and cut off all the excess tie wrap material. Once Ease Revenge snake snares is installed, we always like to hit it with some type of grass or weed killer. Along the fence line, it doesn't have to be a very wide swath. One of the most important things to keep in mind after you install Ease Revenge snake snares is the maintenance aspect of it. It's not hard to maintain the system, but it has to be looked at every other month to make sure there's no grass growing through it, make sure you have no tears, maybe the lawn guy hit it, or you want to make sure you don't have any dead snakes hanging out of it that potentially need to be removed and replaced with a new section of netting. It does need to be maintained fairly often. We recommend about every other month to patrol it and spray it with some type of grass and weed killer, especially throughout the hot months where the grass is really growing like wildfire. Being in the professional pest control world, I've run across every type of customer there is out there. Some people don't care if you spray something that burns their grass along the edge of their fence line. Some people do care. And for those folks that don't want a burned grass line from using one of these mini grass killing products on the market, there is also something called a growth regulator. And you may want to check into using a growth regulator because this is the stuff that golf courses use to keep the grass from growing out of control throughout the year. A growth regulator encourages lateral growth and not vertical growth whenever it's sprayed onto grass. So for those folks that don't want to burn their yard with any of that, I do recommend some type of growth regulator. You can look into that.